Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 11, entitled Swayambhuva Manu advises Dhruva Maharaj to stop off. So I've got a live audience here, so I'll just allow them time to get that up on their devices as well. So 4th Canto, Chapter 11, Text 12. Sa tvang harir anudyatas tat pungsam apisamataha katang tvavadyang kritavan anushikshan satang pratam sa tvang harir anudyatas tat pungsam api sammataha katang tvavadyang kritavan anushikshan satang pratam sa tvang harir anudyatas tat pungsam api sammataha katang tvavadyang kritavan anushikshan satang pratam Satvang harir anudyatas tat pungsam api sammataha katang tvavadyang kritavan anushikshan satang pratam Satvang harir anudyatas tat pungsam api sammataha katang tvavadyang kritavan anushikshan satang pratam. Satvang harir anudyatas tat pungsam api sammataha katang tvavadyang kritavan anushikshan satang pratam. Word for word, sa, that person, tvam, you, hare, by the Supreme Lord, anudyata, being always remembered, tat, his, pungsam, by the devotees, api, also, samata, esteemed, katam, why, to, then, avadyam, abominable act, kritavan, you have undertaken, anushikshan, setting the example, satam, of saintly persons, pratam, a vow. Translation: because you are a pure devotee of the Lord is always thinking of you, and you are also recognized by all his confidential devotees. Your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I am therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? So this is Swayambhuva Manu speaking to Dhruva Maharaj after he's just destroyed pretty much all the yakshas. Purport: Dhruva Maharaj was a pure devotee and was accustomed to always thinking of the Lord. Reciprocally, the Lord always thinks of those pure devotees who think of him only, 24 hours a day. As a pure devotee does not know anything beyond the Lord, so the Lord does not know anything beyond his pure devotee. Swayambhuva Manu pointed out this fact to Dhruva Maharaj. Not only are you a pure devotee, but you are recognized by all pure devotees of the Lord. You should always act in such an exemplary way that others may learn from you. Under the circumstances, it is surprising that you have killed so many faultless yakshas. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksho Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation once again. Because you are a pure devotee of the Lord is always thinking of you. And you are also recognized by all his confidential devotees. Your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I'm therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Today, I wanted to speak on 4 points from this purport. The first being that Dhruva Maharaj is a pure devotee, so naturally he always thinks of the Lord, but reciprocally, the Lord always thinks of him, and how he's not only recognized by the Lord, but all pure devotees acknowledge his position too. Second, this point that a pure devotee should always act in such an exemplary manner so that others may learn from that person. And third, as Swayambhuva Manu asks, why are you killing so many innocent yakshas? What's up with that? And fourth, this was, it's an extension of the point 3. Even if a devotee makes a mistake, even if a devotee does perform an abominable action, he should still be considered saintly. That's a verse from Bhagavad Gita, which I'll get into later. So the first point, Sadavo Hridayam Mayam, Sarunang Hridayam Twaham, Mad Anyat Te Na Jananti Nahang Tebyo Managapi. As Vishnu is speaking to Devrasa Muni in the 9th canto, he says, the pure devotee is always within the core of my heart, and I am always in the heart of the pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything else but me, and I do not know anyone else but them. So there's no question of Dhruva Maharaj being a pure devotee. It's very clear. We've already heard the unprecedented 6-month austerity, 6-month God realization program that he executed in the previous chapters. And he saw Vishnu and he got Vishnu's blessings. And no doubt because of this, his fame immediately spread. And actually, before he even saw Vishnu, as we know, he was choking up the universe. The demigods were like, couldn't breathe because Dhruva Maharaj's austerities were so intense, meditating on the Lord. And Vishnu explained to the demigods, this is because of Dhruva Maharaj, he's fully absorbed in me. So don't worry, I'll go see him and I'll sort it out. So all the demigods knew what was happening. So they all knew Dhruva Maharaj is no ordinary person. He's intensely meditating on the Lord. And of course, also his father, Uttanapad, knew it. Once he returned from the forest, from his austerities, Dhruva Maharaj was a different person. So being a pure devotee, he's always thinking of the Lord and the Lord is always thinking of him. So therefore, the second point, you should always act in such an exemplary manner so that others may learn from you. So if one's a pure devotee, it behooves one to act properly. And this is one of the arguments that Krishna uses to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita in a different way. He says, because you're a Kshatriya and because you've got great parentage, therefore you should act in a certain way. So similarly, if one is a pure devotee, then there are certain things that they should do and should not do. All the rules and regulations are there in great detail in the Nectar of Devotion, what the do's and the don'ts. So sama sarveshu bhuteshu, a pure devotee is equal to all living entities. So why is he annihilating 130,000 yakshas? So interestingly, in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, as far as I know, we only hear of one instance of him doing something not quite right. And that actually was by the Lord's arrangement when he garlanded, is it Samika Rishi? I forget his name, with the snake garland, which is, a bit disrespectful. It's not like a Maha Aparad in one sense, he didn't hit him, he didn't try to kill him or anything like that. But it's definitely disrespectful. But that was by the Lord's arrangement. So Maharaj Parikshit, as far as I'm aware, that's the only instance of I know of him doing something improperly. Otherwise, he was completely perfect. And that's a pure devotee. They're a perfect person. Yad yad acharati shreshtas tad tad eva taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. So as we know, whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Because if one doesn't act properly, what's the result? Krishna explains this a few verses later in the Bhagavad Gita. Yadi hyaham navarte yang jatu karman yatandritaha. Mama vartmanuvartante manushya partha sarvashaha. Krishna explains, for if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. So Krishna is saying this about himself, but that applies for others too, who are in positions of leadership, or in this case, one who is a pure devotee. This applies to them as well. They're a leader in a different sense. And in the purport to Yad Yad Chariti Shreshtas, Srila Prabhupada says, people in general always require a leader who can teach the public by practical behavior. A leader cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. And I read something recently in the first canto which emphasizes this point even more. So in the first canto, chapter 17, text 41, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, such public leaders may be less qualified in academic qualifications, but it is necessary primarily that they be free from the contamination of the 4 disqualifications, namely gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter. So in other words, action is more important than education. So more important is what you do rather than what you know. Or practical application of knowledge is more necessary than theoretical knowledge. So generally speaking, we have to know what proper behavior is before we can do it, generally speaking. But if incidentally someone's behaving properly and they don't know about it, still that's better than someone who knows what they should do and is not doing it. So in other words, if someone's a vegetarian and they don't know why, that's better than someone who's eating meat and knows why one should be a vegetarian. So more important is the action, but knowledge should be there as well. So I found that was quite an interesting point. A qualified leader may be less qualified academically, but the main thing is how they act. That's the primary thing. The qualifications academically is secondary. So it's known in the parenting world that if you say one thing and then do another, your kids will, quote, hear your action and not your words. So we do have to act properly. So example is very important. It reinforces the teaching. And we hear from the Shastra that a pure devotee has perfect character. We hear all the qualities delineated, like titikshasva karunika suridasa hridayhinam. So we hear all these qualities, and naturally we'd expect to see such behavior from a pure devotee. So therefore it behooved Dhruva Maharaj to act according to the Shastra's description of a pure devotee. So this brings us to the third point. So the question comes up, okay, so we know how a pure devotee should act. So Dhruva Maharaj, why are you killing so many innocent yakshas? He was, as we heard in the previous chapter, he was overcome by lamentation and anger upon hearing that his brother was killed by the yakshas. So understandably, for a Kshatriya, he went out to conquer the yakshas. Now the guy who took out my brother, in one sense, there's nothing wrong with that. And this is what His Holiness Vyasa Maharaj was explaining. An eye for an eye is okay, a tooth for a tooth. In other words, one yaksha killed his brother, so it's okay to kill that yaksha who killed his brother. But one yaksha, or rather, one brother of yours that was killed, and then you kill 130,000 yakshas, that's a little bit imbalanced. It's a bit over the top. So Dhruva Maharaj's act of retribution was okay, but to the extent to which he did it was not. So it's like if someone from Auckland, just one of the residents here, someone in Auckland killed someone from Hamilton. And then one SAS soldier who happens to originate from Hamilton decides to come to Auckland and start nailing everyone in Auckland and just taking everyone out. And they're an expert killer, so they're just like annihilating people. That's not appropriate. That's over the top. So in a properly run state, if someone kills someone else illegally, that murderer should be executed. That's the law of Manu Samhita. But you wouldn't go and wipe out everyone related to that murderer, their whole family, their whole dynasty, all their friends. Like, that's no, just that one person. As a saintly king, Dhruva Maharaj can perform his duty as a king and punish wrongdoers, but he can't punish innocent people. And as Vyasa Maharaj explained, he said, this is an interesting point. You can only use as much force to repel an aggressor as he is attacking you with. So in other words, if there's X amount of force being used against you, someone's coming at you with a knife, you're only allowed to use a knife back. You can't pull out a gun. You're not supposed to exceed the amount of force that they're attacking you with. That's apparently some law of defense. I don't know the details there. I'm just repeating what Vyasa Maharaj was saying. So in other words, one yaksha killed your brother, so therefore you can kill that one yaksha, not 130,000. But the really interesting point is this. Apichetsu taracharo bhajate mam ananyabak. Sadhu eva samantavya samyag vyavasito hisaha. So this is the fourth point. Even if one commits the most abominable action, he is still a saint. If someone is 99%, oh, sorry, I just skipped a part there. If someone is engaged in devotional service full time, then he's still saintly because he's properly situated in his determination. So yes, once off, you may do something a little bit off, but 99% of the time you're doing the right thing. And that was Dhruva Maharaj's case. He did something a little off, but he's a pure devotee. So all he does is pure devotional service. So he's always doing the right thing all the time. So he should still be considered a saint. That's Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada really gets into it in the purport in Bhagavad Gita on that point. He says, Krishna is emphatically stating this point. So Krishna forgives such a person. Krishna forgives such a pure devotee for making such a mistake. And we have to too. That's Krishna's instruction. And this kind of thing happened in the life of Parikshit Maharaj too. By Krishna's arrangement, he made a mistake, but it was a small mistake. He just put a snake garland on Samika Rishi, and he should have been excused. It wasn't and of course, Samika Rishi, he did excuse him. He didn't have a problem with it. He didn't even know what happened. He just threw the snake garland away, no problem. What's the big deal? But his son didn't, and there was a problem there. But his son actually should have forgiven him, and his father explained that at length to him. He said, "This king's a great saint. What have you done, my dear son?" But of course, by Krishna's arrangement, Parikshit Maharaj was cursed to die in 7 days. It was arranged that the son get angry and utter that curse, so Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken. Now, continuing on this point, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Anchilila, chapter 3, text 11, there's an incident where Damodar Pandit is criticizing Lord Chaitanya. Out of love, of course. He's doing it out of intense praying. But he's overstepping his boundaries. And in the purport to that text, Srila Prabhupada writes, "A devotee should not be disturbed by the activities of the spiritual master and try to criticize him. Even if there appears to be some discrepancy, the devotee should be fixed in the conviction that even if his spiritual master goes to a liquor shop, he is not a drunkard. Rather, he must have some purpose in going there." And that point that Prabhupada makes is from a prayer to Lord Nityananda, or a bhajan. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it basically says that if Lord Nityananda goes into a liquor shop, then that's not a problem. He's Lord Nityananda. He's the Supreme Lord. So, of course, if we see someone continuously performing abominable activities, that's a different thing. This is a once-off. Even if one commits the most abominable action, he's to be considered saintly. It's incidental things. But also the spiritual master, like Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, he did some pretty interesting things. Like the famous story of him arranging for some hotel staff to be hired to serve meat to the governor of Calcutta at his time. And his disciples were thinking, what the hell is Gurudev doing? And he explained to them, I thought about this hundreds of births ago. I've already considered this. So sometimes the spiritual master may do things that we can't quite comprehend. And it's also explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, 23rd chapter, text 39, if I'm not mistaken, that even our most learned person can't figure out the activities of a Vaishnava. It's very difficult. So we need to follow the Shastra. We need to try to understand the symptoms of a pure devotee. At the same time, while we're still in the beginning stages of bhakti, some things that pure devotees do, we're just not going to be able to comprehend. As that verse says from Chaitanya Charitamrita, even the most learned person can't figure it out. Just like Krishna, we can't understand Krishna fully. Krishna did interesting things. Like I remember when I first read the first canto, and I was thinking, this is pretty far out. God's a liar. I thought this is the supreme absolute truth. How can the supreme absolute truth lie? That's a far out concept. And then, in the 11th chapter, I think, when Krishna returns home to Dwarka, there's prostitutes there. And I'm thinking, God's returning home to his city and he's got prostitutes in his city. That's a pretty far out thing. So sometimes from the mundane platform, things may not make immediate sense, but we have to inquire humbly and submissively. There is something higher going on. In these cases, for example, in the case of Krishna lying, breaking his promise rather, it's because he wanted to show that his love for devotees, his devotee, is more important than his word. His desire to protect his devotee and show them his love transcends any mundane conceptions of morality. So we have to be careful that we don't try to skip over mundane morality. We have to be very careful about that. At the same time, understand that pure devotees, if they're on the transcendental platform, they may do some things sometimes which seem, materially speaking, not quite right. But that's because we're not trying to become pure, we're not trying to become sattva-guna devotees. We're trying to become bhakti yogis. We're trying to transcend the mode of goodness ultimately. So on sattva-guna, honesty, that's a Brahmanical quality, yes. But when Krishna instructs Arjuna to do things like kill Karna now, even though it's dishonest, he's off the chariot. It was the Lord's instruction, Arjuna could do it. And at first he hesitated. And similarly, when Krishna told Yudhishthira Maharaj to tell a lie, Yudhishthira Maharaj hesitated. He's known as Dharmaraj. He never speaks a lie in his life. But because Krishna instructed, it was okay. So that's the highest principle. If Krishna gives an instruction which goes over mundane morality, then it can be followed. But speaking for myself, I haven't received such an instruction, so I am not going to do anything like that in my current situation. But the pure devotees may be on that platform. Just like Srila Prabhupada, there was a Radha Krishna deity at one house in London, and this person was planning to offer them to Srila Prabhupada, but I think they wanted some money from it. I can't remember the full story. But basically, Prabhupada went there with two of his disciples at least, and they basically picked up Radha and Krishna at some point, and they just took them out and put them in the car. And the man was objecting, like, what's going on here? So you could say from one angle that Prabhupada stole Radha and Krishna from this man's house. But he's a pure devotee. He's doing things out of love. He could see that obviously they weren't going to be fully worshipped there, and this man maybe had some ulterior motives there. So he acted in a way which, materially speaking, seemed a little bit strange. But as we know, Srila Prabhupada's no doubt a pure devotee, because if he wasn't, why are we all here right now talking about the glories of the pure devotees of the Lord? So I'll finish there. So in conclusion, we spoke about the undeniable fact that Dhruva Maharaj is a pure devotee. Secondly, because he's a pure devotee, he should act properly. And then therefore, third, why did he kill innocent yakshas? And fourth, even though he did, because it was just a once-off abominable action, he should be forgiven for making a mistake. So I'll finish there. Thank you very much. Is there any questions or comments from the assembled Vaishnavas?
Hare Krishna, Dhanavad Pranam. We still got a few minutes. If you want to any comments, reflection, please come forward.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dhanavad Pranam.
Dhanavad Pranam, Prabhu.
I was trying to read this text yesterday and trying to figure out the contents. It was so difficult because so much of contrast was there. So then I was just reading here and there, trying to figure out what the meaning is. Prabhupada is trying to tell us. Now today you have explained so nicely. The contradiction is somewhat being cleared off. Even a pure devotee, if they makes mistake, we have to understand that point with reference to the God's arrangement, not by our own speculation. And that's what makes me yesterday, oh, such a contradictory statement, but you have cleared it nicely today. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for your inputs.
Hare Krishna. I'm sure you already knew, Prabhu. You're just being very humble and giving some encouragement. Thank you.
Krishna, if there are no further comments, we'll finish here. His great Gadai Gauranga Prabhu ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakti Gaur.
अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय।